If I had known that my own son, my flesh and blood, would one day kick me out of the company I built from nothing, I would have laughed. Not because the idea was impossible, but because I believed I had raised him better than that. But power has a way of revealing the deepest, ugliest corners of the human heart. And yet, even as security escorted me out of the glass building with hundreds of stunned employees watching, I wasn't defeated. I wasn't broken. I knew something my son had forgotten. I was still the owner of 80% of the company. He just didn't know it yet. My name is Eleanor Sterling, founder of Sterling Threads International, a fashion manufacturing empire that grew from 3 sewing machines in my garage to a corporation valued at $87 million a year. I was not born rich. I became rich through decades of grit, sleep deprivation, sacrifice, and relentless work while raising my son Julian alone after my husband died unexpectedly. Julian was the love of my life, my only child, my reason for building everything I built. But children, they grow, they change, and sometimes they become people we don't recognize. It started on a Monday morning, a day that should have been the celebration of Julian's first day as CEO, a position I handed to him with pride, believing he had finally matured. I walked into the building wearing the same confident smile I had worn for 40 years. But the atmosphere felt strange. Employees stared at me, whispering. Some avoided my eyes. Others offered cautious greetings that didn't match the excitement expected on such an important day. When I reached Julian's office, the office I had occupied for 4 decades, I didn't find Julian sitting proudly behind the desk. No, I found Veronica, his wife. She sat beside him, leaning back in the chair like she already owned the place. "Mom," Julian said, without looking up from his computer, "you're not needed here anymore." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "That's right," Veronica added smugly, crossing her arms. "We've decided you should retire, effective immediately. You're holding the company back." I laughed, because the alternative was screaming. "Julian, you cannot remove me from the board. You don't have that authority. I'm the CEO. I have all the authority I need." He didn't even look me in the eyes. "Security," Veronica called sweetly. "Please escort Mrs. Sterling out." 2 guards stepped forward. I knew their faces. They had been with the company for years. They looked ashamed. One whispered, "I'm so sorry, ma'am." I handed over my badge, not with anger, not with tears, with dignity. As I walked out, I heard Veronica whisper, "For someone who claims she built an empire, she sure walks out quietly." But she didn't know me. Not really. Not at all. I drove home in silence, my hands steady on the wheel, my mind sharper than it had been in years. People like Veronica always make the same mistake. They confuse titles with power. Julian may have been CEO, but I was majority shareholder. I still held 80% of the company, and I had never signed over control. If they thought humiliation would paralyze me, they were wrong. I called Robert, my late husband's best friend and one of the original investors. "Emergency board meeting," I said, "tonight." He didn't ask why. He simply replied, "Understood." Then I called David, Susan, and Arthur, our corporate attorney. Each reaction was almost identical. "Julian did what?" Veronica was behind it, I explained. She thinks she's brilliant. And what do you want to do? Robert asked. Exactly what the bylaws allow, I said calmly. We remove him. At 5 p.m. sharp, we met in the executive boardroom. Julian entered late. Veronica entered first, of course, wearing a smirk like she had already won. So what's the big deal? She asked loudly. We're running the company now. Eleanor should relax at home. I ignored her. Instead, I pressed play on the large screen. Footage appeared, taken by an employee. Julian firing me, Veronica celebrating, me handing over my badge with silent dignity. The room fell completely silent. When the video ended, Julian dropped his face into his hands. My God, what have I done? You trusted the wrong person, I said. And you forgot that power is not about humiliating people. David slammed a folder onto the table. Let's skip to the point. Eleanor called this meeting for a reason. I stood. According to corporate bylaws, I said, I am requesting a vote for the immediate removal of the CEO for cause. Veronica laughed. You can't do that. Julian didn't break any laws. Susan opened a second folder. He authorized the transfer of funds without board approval, Article 8 violation. David added, he approved external contracts without due diligence, compliance violation. Arthur, calm as always, concluded, and he negotiated the sale of corporate assets behind the board's back, which is not only illegal, but also, unbelievably, documented. Every word hit Julian like a hammer. I didn't know. Veronica told me they were strategic. I looked straight at him. You believed someone you've known for 3 years over the woman who raised you for 45? He didn't respond. His shoulders collapsed inward. Robert spoke first. I propose Julian Sterling be removed as CEO. And I propose Veronica be permanently banned from company property, David added. Second it, said Susan. Everyone turned to Julian. He could vote. Legally, it didn't matter. My 80% was enough. But symbolically, his voice cracked. I vote in favor. I remove myself. Veronica gasped. Are you insane? You're throwing away everything we planned. No, he said quietly. I'm correcting the biggest mistake of my life. Arthur nodded. Motion passes unanimously. And just like that, Veronica's empire of manipulation collapsed. I didn't even realize I had been holding my breath until the elevator door slid open and the cold air of the 42nd floor hit my face like a slap. My heels clicked against the polished marble, each step echoing like a countdown to something I hadn't prepared for. The floor felt different somehow, quieter, heavier, as if the walls themselves knew something I didn't. And everywhere I looked, employees avoided my eyes, offering stiff, nervous smiles that vanished the second I passed them. It was the kind of silence that wasn't natural, the kind that hid something sharp beneath it. My heart tapped faster, sensing danger before my mind could name it. But then I saw him, my son, Adrian, standing at the far end of the hallway surrounded by executives, all of whom were nodding at him with this strange forced admiration that made my stomach twist. He wasn't supposed to be here this early. He wasn't even supposed to be starting CEO for another month. Yet there he was, in my suit, in my place, in my building. And the look he gave me wasn't excitement or pride. It was calculation, pure, cold calculation that didn't belong on the face of the boy I had raised. My feet slowed, but my pulse sped up because something in his eyes told me this wasn't going to be a normal day, not even close. Mom, he said, smiling, but it wasn't a smile at all. It was a performance, a rehearsed one. We need to talk. And just like that, every executive around him stepped back like a Red Sea parting, leaving me isolated, spotlit, while he remained comfortably shielded by their silent allegiance. I felt the imbalance instantly, like someone had already removed the ground from beneath my feet and was waiting to see if I noticed. My fingers curled at my sides, steadying myself. He gestured toward the conference room. I walked. What else could I do? But each step felt heavier than the last, like I was walking towards something irreversible. The moment the glass door shut behind us, he didn't even sit. He stood at the head of the table, my seat, acting as if he'd already earned it. "I'll make this quick," he said, hands clasped. "There are structural changes happening starting today." My throat tightened because no transition speech begins like that. Not from a son to his mother, not from a successor to a founder, not from a child to the person who built the world he was now standing inside. He took a breath, as if steadying himself before delivering a blow he'd been waiting to throw. And then he said it. "You're no longer needed here." For a second, the room didn't move. I didn't move. The walls didn't move. The world didn't move. It felt like every molecule in the air froze. I blinked slowly, almost calmly, because surely I'd misheard him. Surely this wasn't real. Surely my own son wouldn't be stupid enough or cruel enough to say something so warped. But his expression didn't change. He meant it. He meant every single syllable. My chest tightened, and when I finally found my voice, it came out quiet, steady, but shaking underneath. "I own 80% of this company." His lips curved upward, but not with amusement, with pity, mock pity. "Control isn't about ownership anymore," he said softly, almost gently, which somehow made it worse. "It's about influence, direction, vision." He stepped closer, lowering his voice as if discussing a secret he'd been savoring for months. "And the board agrees. You're outdated." I stepped back, grasping the edge of a chair to keep myself upright. "Adrian, you don't understand what you're doing." The sentence came out more desperate than I intended. It wasn't weakness. It was shock, betrayal, a lifetime of sacrifice collapsing into a single moment. But he tilted his head, studying me like I was an obstacle, not his mother. "I understand perfectly," he replied. Then he hit the intercom button. "Security to conference room A." The words punched the air out of my lungs. He didn't even look at me. He just pressed the button with the casual ease of someone ordering lunch. Someone who had done this before. Someone who had practiced saying those words. My eyes burned as I took a slow breath, the reality of the situation locking into place like shackles around my ribs. He wasn't bluffing. He wasn't testing me. He was removing me. My son was removing me from my own company. "We can do this quietly," he added, still not meeting my eyes, "or we can make it messy. Your choice." A cold shiver crawled down my spine. I could feel something unraveling inside me, around me, in the air. Years of late nights, years of sacrifices, years of climbing out of financial wreckage to build something powerful. And now the hands that were about to shove me out belonged to the boy whose college tuition I paid in advance. My breathing grew shaky, and I tried to speak, to reach him, to remind him of who I was, who he was. But then I saw movement through the glass door. Security. 2 men in black suits, walking toward us, toward me. I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, before I could even reach for the memories that might save us, the door clicked open. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us." And in that tiny second, that sliver of frozen time, before I answered, before I moved, before I reacted, all I could think was one thing. He planned this. He planned all of it. And I had no idea why. And that was the part that terrified me most. My legs moved before my mind caught up, a slow, shaky step backward that felt more like instinct than choice. The two security officers didn't touch me. They didn't have to. The power dynamic had already shifted the moment they walked in. I wasn't their boss anymore. I wasn't even someone they hesitated about handling. I was just another removal, another problem to escort out of the building, out of my building, out of the company I built from scratch with blistered hands and sleepless nights. "Ma'am, this way," the taller guard said, motioning toward the door. His voice was firm, but not cruel, as if following orders he wished he didn't have to. But orders were orders, and the man signing their paychecks was standing behind me, my son, who still wouldn't look at me. I forced myself to turn around, to walk, to maintain whatever dignity I could salvage in this nightmare. But every step felt like walking through cement, thick, suffocating, slow. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear the blood rushing through my ears. My vision blurred at the edges, and I felt my throat tighten, but I refused to cry. Not here, not in front of them, not in front of him. As we exited the conference room, I glanced back. One last desperate attempt to find something in Adrian's face that resembled my son. Some flicker of remorse, hesitation, guilt. Something human. But he had already turned away, speaking quietly to a CFO who had always acted like a parasite dressed in a suit. Adrian didn't look at me even once, and that hurt more than the betrayal itself, because it told me this wasn't a mistake. This was conviction, and I had no idea what I had done to deserve it. The hallway stretched ahead like a never-ending tunnel, lined with glass offices where employees pretended not to stare. I caught glimpses, quick, darting eyes that immediately snapped back to screens to avoid being implicated. Whispers echoed behind closed doors. Someone gasped when they recognized me. A few newer staff members watched with confused curiosity, unaware of the history they were witnessing. I kept my chin up, my spine straight, my breath slow. If Adrian wanted to break me publicly, he would need to try harder. But with every step toward the elevator, a question kept clawing at me from the inside.
Why? Why would he do this? Why did the board support him? Why today, his first day? What had I missed? We reached the elevator, and one of the guards pressed the button. The door slid open with a soft ding, echoing through the silence like a taunt. I stepped inside, and they stepped in behind me, not beside me, not offering space, but behind me, closing the door with their bodies forming a cage without touching me at all. A control tactic. Subtle. Cold. As the elevator began descending, the taller guard cleared his throat softly. "Ma'am, for what it's worth," he murmured, voice low enough that the other guard might not have heard. I'm sorry about this. Truly." His apology hit harder than Adrian's betrayal because it came from a stranger who understood the cruelty I was being subjected to, even if he couldn't do anything to stop it. I swallowed hard, my voice trapped somewhere deep behind the shock. "It's not your fault," I finally whispered. My hands were trembling, but I hid them by clasping them tightly. "You're following orders." He hesitated. "Yes, but I didn't think it would be you." You. Not the founder, not the owner, not the boss. You. A person. A mother. And suddenly, for the first time since this nightmare began, my eyes stung with something I couldn't control. Not grief, not anger. Humiliation.
The kind that crawls under your skin and festers, reminding you that everyone watching believes you've already lost, that your power was never as real as you thought, that you were disposable to people you trusted. When the elevator reached the ground floor, the guard stepped out first, scanning the lobby in that ritualistic way trained security always did. Then one of them motioned again, and I walked out. The lobby was busy.
too busy. More eyes watching, more whispers, my company's logo gleaming above me like a cruel reminder that even the walls didn't belong to me anymore. But just as I stepped toward the exit, a voice cut through the room like a blade. Stop. Everything froze. My heart stopped. My breath stopped. Even the guards stiffened. Because that voice, that was Victor, Adrian's mentor. The man who had always wanted control of my empire but never had the power to take it until now. He strode toward us, tall, confident, a shark in a tailored suit. And when he reached me, he smiled. A slow, satisfied smile that made my stomach twist. "Leaving so soon?" he asked, almost sweetly. "I was hoping to speak with you before you departed." His eyes glittered with something poisonous, and in that moment I understood, deeply, painfully, unmistakably. Adrian hadn't planned this alone. He had been guided, coached, weaponized.
Let her go, Adrian's voice came from behind Victor, but not with concern. Not for me. It was annoyance, as if Victor interrupting this moment was merely inconvenient. But Victor didn't step back. He leaned closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "You should have retired when you had the chance." My blood ran cold, because that line, that wasn't a threat. It was a warning I should have seen months ago, before everything changed, before my son stopped being my son, before the company I built was weaponized against me, before the people I trusted sharpened their knives, before my entire life collapsed in one morning. And as Victor stepped back with a smug nod, the truth surfaced in my mind like a monster rising from dark water. This wasn't a hostile takeover. This was a coordinated execution, and I was only beginning to see how deep it went. The guards resumed walking, but this time the air felt different, thicker, charged, like every molecule around us was vibrating with the tension Victor had injected into the moment. My heels tapped against the marble floor, the sound sharper, louder, almost accusatory. People weren't whispering anymore. They were openly staring. Because now it wasn't just a CEO being escorted out. It was a spectacle, a warning, a message to anyone who ever forgot who really held power here. As the revolving doors spun open, a gust of cold air slapped my face, sending a shiver down my spine. The guards stopped just outside the entrance, their job technically done, but neither of them moved. They stood there stiffly, almost awkwardly, as if waiting to see whether I would collapse or fight or scream. But I did none of that. I just stood there, clutching my purse with numb fingers while the morning sunlight felt unforgiving on my skin. The taller guard cleared his throat again. "Ma'am, do you need transportation?" It was a kind gesture, but it only made the humiliation burn deeper. I shook my head. "I'll manage." The words scraped out quietly, like they came from someone else entirely, someone in survival mode. As I walked away from the building, my building, I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I did, I knew something inside me might shatter beyond repair, and I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. My car was parked down the street, and each step I took toward it felt strangely surreal, like I was drifting outside my own body, watching a stranger live out the worst day of their life. But the moment I slid into the driver's seat and shut the door, the silence engulfed me, heavy, crippling. My chest tightened, and the first tear escaped before I could stop it. Then another, and another, until the dam broke completely and I was gripping the steering wheel, sobbing into it like my lungs were failing. My son, my own son, the baby I held through fevers, the boy I cheered for at every terrible middle school soccer game, the young man I supported through heartbreaks, failures, dreams. He kicked me out, planned it, executed it coldly, efficiently, without hesitation, without guilt, without love. The betrayal seared through me like acid, eating through years of memories, recontextualizing every recent moment in a sickening new light. The late-night calls he ignored, the board meetings he said he was too busy to attend, the way Victor had been circling him quietly, offering advice, offering opportunities, offering mentorship that I had initially welcomed, foolishly believing he only wanted to help my son grow. But now, sitting alone in my car, tears burning down my cheeks, the truth finally clicked. Victor hadn't been mentoring Adrian. He had been grooming him, preparing him.
Turning him against me. My breathing hitched as the realization slammed into me with brutal clarity. This wasn't about the company. This was about power. And I had handed my son the weapon he used to destroy me. I wiped my face roughly, forcing myself to inhale, then exhale, then inhale again. Falling apart wouldn't fix anything. I needed answers. I needed to know how far this went. I needed to know what the board had been told, what lies had been fed to them, what weaknesses had been exploited, what promises had been made. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, startling me. For a heartbeat, foolishly, I hoped it was Adrian, calling to apologize, calling because he regretted everything, calling because he realized what he had done and he wanted to fix it. But it wasn't his name on the screen. It was my assistant, Elena. I answered immediately. Elena? Her voice wobbled the moment she spoke. Ma'am, I'm so sorry. I didn't know they were going to do that. I swear they told me you approved everything. My stomach flipped. Approved what? My voice sharpened instinctively, my instincts kicking in, my professional self resurfacing through the emotional wreckage. Elena? She hesitated, then lowered her voice as if someone might overhear her, even across the phone. The documents, the restructuring proposal, the leadership transition plan, the proxy agreements. I froze. What proxy agreements? My blood ran cold. Alana, what did they make you sign? It wasn't me, ma'am. It was your son. He brought in a legal team 2 weeks ago. They said you had transferred authority over several operational controls. They said you wanted to step back quietly. They said I needed to help facilitate communication with the board so you wouldn't be overwhelmed. My heart dropped into my stomach. I never signed anything, I said slowly. I know, she whispered back, voice shaking. But they had documents with your signature. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My signature. Forged. Weaponized. Used to remove me. Elena, I said, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles went white. Listen to me carefully. Did anyone else see these documents? Yes, she breathed. The entire board. My vision tunneled. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a coup. A coordinated, deliberate, legally calculated takeover, orchestrated by a man who was supposed to teach my son business, not teach him treachery. My son had been manipulated, possibly threatened, possibly promised power he didn't understand, possibly convinced I was the enemy. A slow, cold fury began to ignite beneath my ribs, hot enough to burn away the shock, the humiliation, the grief. A different version of me began rising.
The version that built an empire when everyone expected me to fail. The version that negotiated contracts with billionaires who underestimated me. The version that worked 18-hour days for years without flinching. The version that did not lose. Elena, I said steadily, my voice no longer shaking. I need you to do something for me. Anything, she whispered. I need every document they claimed I signed. I need board emails. I need meeting minutes. I need access logs. I need anything unusual from the past 2 months. And I need it fast. Elena inhaled sharply. Ma'am, if they catch me, they won't, I whispered, the fire inside me returning with terrifying clarity, because I'm going to take my company back. A beat of silence. Then Elena whispered, almost reverently, I'll get everything. I hung up. My tears were gone, my breath steady, my mind razor sharp. Adrian and Victor thought they buried me, but they forgot something fatal. I built the foundation, and I know exactly where the cracks are. They wanted war? They had no idea what they had just unleashed. That fire in my chest didn't fade. It grew. Slow at first, like a match head catching, but then it surged into something hotter, sharper, more focused than anything I'd felt in years. Betrayal had a way of stripping away fear and leaving only clarity behind. And right now, I saw everything with a clarity that almost frightened me. I started the car, pulling into traffic with steady hands, but inside, a storm was brewing. Every green light I passed, every turn I made, every street I crossed felt like another path leading me deeper into the truth. I replayed every moment from the past few months. The late board dinners I hadn't been invited to, the offhand comments from Adrian about modernizing leadership, Victor's suspiciously frequent visits, the sudden legal consults he brushed off as professional development. It had all been happening in front of me, and I had been too blinded by love, pride, and trust to see it. As I drove, my phone buzzed again, 3 times in rapid succession. A voice message from Elena, a text with an attachment, and then another text. They're deleting things. I can see activity on the internal servers. Someone's trying to wipe the transition files. My stomach tightened. They were covering their tracks. They knew I wouldn't go quietly. Good. Let them be afraid. I pulled into the underground parking of my home, driving past concrete pillars until I reached my reserved spot. The air was cooler here, silent, dimly lit, the kind of place that forced your mind to think clearly. I sat in the darkened car, my fingers tapping on the steering wheel as I listened to Elena's message. Her voice trembled as she spoke. Ma'am, they're saying you approved a new bylaw amendment limiting majority ownership power if the majority holder is emotionally compromised. They said you insisted, verbally, that you wanted the board to handle things while you recovered from stress. They claim you made several emotional outbursts, which is not true, obviously. They told the board you were unstable. Unstable. The word made my pulse spike. They were rewriting my reputation, liquidating my authority, turning me into a liability. A mother made hysterical by power. A woman overwhelmed by her own success. A founder losing her grip. A narrative crafted to make my removal look like mercy instead of mutiny. I exhaled slowly, the fury settling deeper into my bones. And then I pressed play on the second file Elena sent. It was a recording. Older women telling her story. Audio, low quality, but unmistakably clear enough. Victor's voice. Cold, measured, manipulative. She's unpredictable now. You've seen how she's been lately. At some point, we need to ask what's best for the company. And Adrian, if you want to lead, You can't keep letting her stunt your growth. She won't step aside willingly. Sometimes the hardest decisions are the right ones. My nails dug into my palm. Then Adrian's voice followed, hesitant, but breaking. I don't want to hurt her. And Victor replied smoothly, You're not hurting her. You're saving the company she built. Sometimes leadership means protecting people from themselves. My head dropped forward. It wasn't just manipulation, it was indoctrination. Victor had slowly rewired my son's mind, piece by piece, fear by fear, promise by promise, until logic blurred and emotion warped, and duty twisted into betrayal. My hand shook, not from sadness now, but from something darker, more dangerous. A mother's wrath sharpened into strategy. I stepped out of the car. Every step toward the elevator made the betrayal sink deeper, the cold air biting my skin, the silence amplifying my heartbeat. By the time I entered my penthouse, I was composed again, fully, completely, terrifyingly. I set my purse on the kitchen counter, opened my laptop, and connected to the secure server I had quietly built years ago. The one not even the board knew existed. The one I created back when trust was a luxury I couldn't afford. Lines of code scrolled across the screen as I initiated an archive extraction command. Every forgotten file, every hidden document, every digital fingerprint left behind by anyone trying to erase anything related to me, my system captured it, mirrored it, preserved it. I watched as folders appeared one after another. Proxy agreements, bylaw amendments, CEO transition planning, private board emails, legal consults, mentorship logs, financial forecasts. There were hundreds of files, maybe thousands. I clicked on one labeled Private Board Discussion Confidential.mp4. The video opened. To my shock, it was a recording of a board meeting I wasn't supposed to have access to. They must have forgotten to disable the backup camera in the smaller conference room. Rookie mistake. And there they were, the board members, sitting around the sleek oval table, discussing me like I was a faulty machine that needed replacing. A liability to be managed, not a human, not a founder, not a mother. And then Victor entered the frame, calm, authoritative, confident, holding a folder in hand. He placed the documents on the table, documents with my forged signature. He spoke casually, as if discussing a quarterly report instead of destroying a woman's life. She's agreed to step back, he said. It's better this way. She's been making emotional decisions, and we should respect her request to take time off. Adrian is prepared to step in immediately. One board member frowned. This seems abrupt. Has she spoken to any of us directly? Victor smiled. That's why she asked me to handle everything. She didn't want to appear weak. Weak. They used that word. They believed that word. My throat burned because I had never been weaker than the moment I trusted people like them. I closed the video. My hands were steady again, because now I had proof. Hard, legal, damning proof. And if they thought I was going to walk away quietly, they hadn't been paying attention for the last 20 years. I stood up slowly, almost ceremoniously, as if the air itself needed to understand who it was dealing with again.
And then I whispered into the empty room, "You think you kicked me out." A pause, a breath, a spark. But you just declared war. I grabbed my phone and called someone I hadn't spoken to in years, a man who specialized in corporate recoveries, hostile takebacks, legal warfare, and destroying people who thought they were untouchable. He picked up on the second ring. "It's been a long time," he said. "It has," I replied. "I need your help." Silence. Then a low, knowing exhale. "Tell me who I'm destroying." I closed my eyes. "My son," I whispered. "And the man who turned him against me." The line went quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Good. I like that. Give me everything you have: files, recordings, communications, evidence of manipulation. No one can question what you bring to the table if it's airtight. And Eleanor, tread carefully. You don't want to burn bridges you might need later." I hung up, my fingers trembling slightly as I returned to the laptop. Every document, every folder, every email I had quietly archived over the years now became ammunition. I had been preparing for a contingency I never imagined would be needed, but life had a way of testing the unprepared.
The first step was strategy. The next step was exposure. I opened a folder labeled Julian_transition_emails, scanning through threads that detailed the subtle but persistent manipulation Victor had orchestrated. He had promised Julian autonomy, power, freedom from his mother's old-fashioned constraints, all while slowly building a narrative where I appeared tyrannical, controlling, and emotionally unstable. The realization hit me in waves. My son hadn't failed me out of malice. He had been lied to, gaslighted, and slowly molded into believing that expelling me was the correct, logical, and necessary action for the company. And yet, despite everything, I still felt a twinge of sorrow. Julian wasn't a villain. He was a pawn, one I now had to guide back to reality. I moved to the next folder. Financial misappropriations. The numbers were staggering. Unauthorized transfers, phantom consulting agreements, off-the-books negotiations. Veronica hadn't just been a catalyst. She had been the spark for something much larger, a scheme to take control, to privatize decision-making, to undermine me legally and financially. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. I had fought corporate battles before, yes. I had survived market crashes, hostile takeovers, and boardroom power plays. But this felt personal, infinitely more dangerous. It was a war that blended blood and business, emotion and legality. I called Julian. "Mom?" His voice was tentative, cautious, hesitant. "I need you to be honest," I said. "I need you to tell me everything Victor promised you, everything Veronica suggested, everything that made you think expelling me was right." He sighed, a long, heavy sound filled with regret and exhaustion. I thought I was doing the right thing. She painted it as opportunity. She told me I could modernize, innovate, finally step out from under your shadow. She told me that if I hesitated, I'd never be free to lead, and I wanted to believe it. "And you didn't pause to question her methods? To think about the consequences?" I asked. My voice was calm, but carried a weight that made him flinch. "I didn't want to think about consequences," he admitted. "I was blinded by the idea of proving myself. I thought I was ready, but I wasn't. And now I see it. I've been foolish, Mom." "Foolish isn't the word," I said softly. "Manipulated, lied to, misguided. But there's a difference between losing power because of a mistake and losing your soul because you refuse to learn from it. You're on the right side of the line, Julian. The moment you realize your error, you start walking back."
He was silent for a long time, and then, quietly, "What do we do now?" I leaned forward, my hands clasped over the edge of the desk. "Now, we rebuild. But this time, we do it smart. Every action must be precise, every decision documented, every potential betrayal anticipated. Are we going to fight back?" he asked, almost in a whisper. "Yes," I said firmly, "but not recklessly. Victor and Veronica think they're untouchable. They've underestimated us. That's their mistake. And trust me, mistakes in my world are expensive." I explained the plan slowly, deliberately. Legal moves, corporate maneuvers, internal audits. We would expose the unauthorized contracts, reveal the falsified communications, highlight the breaches of compliance policies. Every piece of evidence would be incontrovertible. And Julian, my son, would be my witness, my partner in rebuilding his own integrity. He listened, nodding slowly, absorbing every word. I could see the change beginning to take root, the humility, the comprehension, the responsibility. For the first time since the morning of my expulsion, he was not only seeing the consequences of his actions, but also the path to redemption. The next few days were a whirlwind. Arthur coordinated legal strategies, combing through corporate bylaws and federal statutes. Elena monitored the servers, ensuring no data was tampered with. Susan and David handled communications with key stakeholders and employees, maintaining morale while subtly uncovering additional evidence of Victor's influence. I watched Julian closely during these hours. He moved with more thoughtfulness, consulted rather than commanded, listened more than he spoke. The boy who had been blinded by ambition was slowly transforming into a man capable of understanding the gravity of leadership. One evening, as I reviewed the evidence with Arthur in the boardroom, Julian entered. He had a stack of files in hand, clearly having gone through them meticulously. "Mom, I want to do this properly," he said, voice steady. "I don't want to leave anything half done. Every record, every document, we expose it all." I smiled faintly, a mix of pride and sorrow. "You're learning faster than you think, but remember this, the goal isn't vengeance. The goal is justice and restoration of integrity. Keep your mind focused on that, and you won't lose yourself in this fight." Julian nodded. "I understand." The night stretched long. Files, spreadsheets, and recordings spread across the table like battle plans. Each piece of evidence strengthened our position. Each revelation tightened the net around Victor and Veronica. And with each passing hour, Julian's transformation became more apparent, not just in actions, but in posture, tone, and resolve. By midnight, the strategy was complete. The board would convene under emergency terms, presented with the indisputable facts of unauthorized actions, corporate breaches, and manipulations. Victor and Veronica would have no room to maneuver. Their carefully constructed narrative of my instability and Julian's justified actions would crumble under the weight of documentation, recordings, and first-hand accounts. I looked at Julian, seated across from me, exhausted but focused. "Tomorrow, the board sees the truth," I said softly. "And you, my son, will see the consequences of being misled and the power of making things right." He looked up, a mixture of fear and determination in his eyes. "I don't want to fail again," he admitted. "You won't. Not if you continue to act with humility, honesty, and courage. That's all I ask." And for the first time in months,
I felt a quiet reassurance settling in, not just for the company, but for the son who had almost lost his way and for the legacy we would protect together. The night ended with quiet preparation. Tomorrow would be decisive. Tomorrow, the boardroom would witness truth unfiltered. And tomorrow, Julian would take the first real step toward becoming the man I always knew he could be. I went to my office window, looking out over the city lights, and whispered into the silence, "It's time to end this the right way." Morning came with a cold clarity. The city was just beginning to stir, but I was already dressed and in the office reviewing the final presentation for the board. Every slide, every document, every email excerpt had been meticulously arranged to tell the story of betrayal, mismanagement, and unauthorized actions. There would be no ambiguity, no excuses. Julian arrived shortly after 7 a.m., looking different than the disheveled man from 6 months ago. He was composed, prepared, and visibly determined. I could see the tension in his jaw, the quiet fire in his eyes. This wasn't about ego anymore. It was about accountability and truth. "We're ready," I said. "Remember what I told you last night. Speak honestly, acknowledge mistakes, and don't let emotion drive your words. Let the facts do the talking." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I understand."
By 8:30, the boardroom was filled. Arthur had arranged seats in a semicircle, with Victor and Veronica positioned near the end, unaware of the full extent of what awaited them. Susan, David, and Robert sat alongside Julian and me, each ready to testify to the chain of events. I started the meeting. "Good morning, everyone," I began, my voice steady. "We are here to discuss recent actions that have impacted the leadership and integrity of this company. I want to present evidence regarding unauthorized decisions, financial discrepancies, and manipulation that affected both leadership and operational decisions." Veronica's expression hardened immediately. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. Victor smirked, confident, or at least attempting to appear confident, but the room shifted subtly. Employees' eyes were sharp, waiting for clarity, for justice. Julian stood. His voice was calm but deliberate. "I want to speak first," he said. "I made mistakes, serious mistakes. I allowed myself to be influenced by advice that was not in the best interest of this company or my family. I humiliated the woman who gave me everything and acted without authority. I apologize for my actions." A hush fell over the room. Victor's smirk faltered slightly. Veronica's jaw tightened. "I have come to understand," Julian continued, "that leadership is not about power, titles, or dominance. It is about respect, responsibility, and integrity. For the next 6 months, I will work under direct supervision in various departments to truly understand the work that keeps this company running. I am here to face the consequences of my actions and to demonstrate my commitment to change." I spoke next, presenting the evidence. Financial statements, email chains, contracts signed without approval, unauthorized transfers, all of it displayed clearly on the projector. Arthur guided us through each piece of documentation, highlighting the violations, the lack of due diligence, and the legal risks. Veronica's face turned pale. This isn't accurate," she hissed. "You're twisting the facts." "No," I interrupted calmly. "These are facts. You and Victor orchestrated actions outside the authority granted by the board, directly violating company bylaws and federal corporate law. You attempted to manipulate Julian to gain control and bypass proper corporate governance. The evidence speaks for itself."
Victor tried to speak, but Arthur firmly interjected. We will allow no interruptions. The evidence has been verified and cross-checked. Any objections will be noted, but will not halt the presentation of facts.
Veronica's hands trembled slightly as she fidgeted with her pen. I could see the realization dawning on her. The plan she had spent months constructing was crumbling in real time. Julian took a deep breath. I want to add something. I believed Veronica's claims over my mother's judgment because I was blinded by ambition. I thought I was ready to lead, but I wasn't. I allowed manipulation to cloud my understanding of right and wrong. Today, I acknowledge my error publicly, and I accept the consequences. The room was silent. Employees leaned forward, absorbing the gravity of the moment. Even Victor shifted uneasily in his chair, sensing the tide turning. I concluded, given the evidence and the acknowledgement from my son, the board must act to protect the company, its employees, and its legacy. I propose the immediate removal of Veronica Sterling from any corporate decision-making and the enforcement of legal action to prevent further manipulation. I also reaffirm the board's previous decision regarding Julian's temporary training period and the eventual appointment of a permanent, qualified CEO. Robert spoke next. I second the motion. The evidence is undeniable, and the actions threaten the stability of the company. Immediate enforcement is necessary. David and Susan nodded in agreement. Arthur called for a formal vote. With the combined weight of the majority shareholders, the vote was unanimous. Veronica's face fell, a mixture of fury and disbelief. She had gambled everything and lost. You think this ends here? She spat. I will make sure everyone knows what happened. I'll ruin this company. I stood, calm, but unyielding. You have two choices. Sign a confidentiality agreement and leave with what little dignity remains, or face legal consequences for conspiracy and attempted fraud. The decision is yours. The room was still. Veronica's eyes darted to Julian, silently pleading for support. He did not look at her. He had learned the hard way that loyalty must be earned, not commanded. Finally, she signed the agreement, her hands trembling. The sound of the pen on paper echoed like a small victory. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her, leaving the room in stunned silence. Julian exhaled slowly. I can't believe it's over, he said. I placed a hand on his shoulder. It's never truly over, Julian, but today you faced the truth. You acknowledged your mistakes, and you took the first step towards becoming the man I always knew you could be.
Hours later, after sending notices and emails to employees and clients, I sat in my office reflecting. The company was intact. The manipulations were exposed. The next phase, healing, training, and preparing for a permanent CEO, was underway. And for the first time in months, I felt the calm certainty that comes from knowing justice had been served and that the legacy I had built would endure. Julian returned to my office, carrying a small stack of notes. Mom, I want to make this right, he said. Not just in the company, but with you. I don't want to just be your son. I want to be someone you're proud of. I smiled faintly, holding back emotion. That's a promise you must keep every day, Julian. Actions, not words. And from what I've seen, you're ready to begin. The sun was setting outside the window, casting a golden light over the city. It illuminated the boardroom, the office, and the quiet determination on our faces. A storm had passed, leaving clarity, purpose, and the possibility of true redemption. The morning arrived with a quiet anticipation. The sun poured through the glass walls of the office, casting long shadows across the floor. Today was the final day of my interim CEO period,
the day we would officially hand over leadership to Catherine, the woman we had carefully chosen to guide the company forward. Employees began filing into the auditorium before 9 a.m., their faces a mixture of curiosity, relief, and respect. Many had been with the company for decades, and the events of the past 6 months had left a mark on all of us. I could feel their eyes on me as I walked to the stage, Julian beside me. He carried himself with a quiet confidence now. The arrogance of his past was replaced with humility earned through experience. "Good morning, everyone," I began. My voice carried over the auditorium, calm, clear, and authoritative. Today marks an important milestone for our company. Over the past 6 months, we have faced challenges that tested our integrity, our leadership, and our commitment to our core values. But we have emerged stronger because we acted with honesty, courage, and respect. Heads nodded throughout the room. Julian stepped forward. He wanted to speak, he said, his voice steady. "I have spent the last 6 months learning what it truly means to be a part of this company. I have worked in every department, learned every process, and faced the consequences of my mistakes. I'm here today not as your CEO, but as a team member committed to making amends and doing the work that earns respect." I continued. "It is now time to welcome the new permanent CEO, Catherine. She comes to us with 25 years of experience in our industry, a proven track record of leadership, and a vision that aligns with the values we have built this company upon. I have full confidence that she will lead us to continued success." Catherine stepped forward. Her demeanor was professional but warm, her eyes scanning the room with understanding and purpose. She smiled as she shook my hand. "Thank you, Eleanor. I am honored to lead this company and to work alongside such a dedicated team. Together, we will continue to grow, innovate, and uphold the integrity that defines this company." Applause filled the auditorium. Julian, standing beside me, allowed himself a small, proud smile. He had witnessed the true meaning of leadership, not power, not dominance, but responsibility, humility, and action. I addressed the employees once more. I will remain as majority shareholder and board member. I will continue to support Catherine and this team in ensuring that our company thrives. But today is about moving forward, about stability, and about honoring the work of everyone here. Every department, every role, every individual matters. Hands went up as questions were asked and answered with transparency. Employees wanted clarity, assurance, and guidance. Julian listened carefully, taking notes and absorbing everything. I could see him learning once again, this time not from mistakes, but from observation, from understanding how a leader earns trust without demanding it. After the meeting, the employees dispersed, leaving a calm silence in the auditorium. I walked Julian to the side. "How do you feel?" I asked softly. "Different," he admitted. "Humbled. Ready. I finally understand what you and Dad always knew. True leadership isn't about asserting authority. It's about earning it every single day." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Julian, you've taken the first step. It's up to you to keep walking that path. Remember, respect is given, not taken, and trust is earned through consistent actions." We watched Catherine address a few senior managers, outlining her vision and answering questions. Julian observed closely, absorbing the details, asking thoughtful questions, demonstrating a commitment to learn and grow.
That evening, the office was quiet. I returned to my personal office, sitting behind the oak desk that had seen decades of decisions, crises, and victories. I looked over the city, reflecting on the journey of the past year. A storm had come, threatening to destroy what I had built, but resilience, preparation, and principle had prevailed. Julian knocked softly and entered. "Mom," he said, "thank you for everything, for believing in me even when I didn't deserve it, for giving me the chance to learn, to face my mistakes, and to become better. I I love you." I smiled, a deep warmth spreading through me. "I love you too, Julian. Always have, always will. But love alone is not enough. You must live your values, act with integrity, and continue to earn the trust of those around you." He nodded. "I will. I promise." We stood together for a moment, a mother and son, no titles separating us, just shared history, lessons learned, and the bond that could survive mistakes, ambition, and betrayal. As Julian left my office, I sat alone for a while longer. The city lights glimmered like stars below, a reminder of the countless lives touched by the work of our hands, our vision, and our perseverance. I poured a small glass of wine and held it up to the light, thinking of my husband, of the foundation we had built, and of the legacy that would endure. True power, I realized, was never in the office, the titles, or the shares. It was in knowledge, preparation, and the courage to act with justice when it mattered most. It was in integrity, in resilience, and in the ability to guide others toward the truth, even when it hurt. And most importantly, it was in the ability to forgive, to rebuild, and to ensure that the next generation could learn from the past without repeating it. I raised my glass silently, a toast to what had been lost, what had been regained, and what would continue to grow long after that day. The journey was far from over, but in that quiet moment, I allowed myself a rare satisfaction, a victory not of ego, but of principle, dignity, and the unshakable foundation of a life built with integrity. The story of the company, of Julian, of Veronica, and of me had reached a turning point. And as I looked out at the city, I knew that the legacy we had fought to protect would endure, stronger and wiser than ever before.